Hi, I'm Joanne Joseph. I'm coming to you from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, with this latest episode of The Blue Space. Thank you for joining us. As you're probably aware, Africa ships the bulk of its raw material offshore for processing, only to import the final product. So how do we keep the value right here on the continent by substituting our imports for local manufacturing? Let's find out on The Blue Space.
My name is Ann Mugweru. I lead diversified industries and real estate at Stanbic Kenya in the corporate and investment banking space.
I'm Stephan Grabowski and I'm the CEO of Kenyan.
What's on your playlist at the moment?
Podcasts.
I do a lot of podcasts. You'll be surprised. I'm not so much of music.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Tea.
What do you love most about your work?
It's really seeing people grow and develop.
What's your get up and go song?
I like This Is My Fight song.
Hello, I'm Joanne Joseph, and you're in The Blue Space, brought to you by Standard Bank Corporate and Investment Banking. This episode is being filmed in Nairobi, not far from Kenya's East African import and export hubs. Every day, Africa sends a wealth of raw materials overseas to be processed and converted into finished products. And millions of Africans are missing out on the benefits of local manufacturing. How can import substitution solve this? Well, joining me to unpack this question are Executive for Diversified Industries at Stanbic Bank Kenya, Ann Mugweru, and Kenyan Manufacturers CEO, Stephan Grabowski. Thank you so much for being with us today, Stephan and Ann. So looking forward to this chat. And Ann, I want to start with you by defining what we're talking about here, this very intimidating term, import substitution. Well, what is it exactly, and why is it so important to Africa's development?
So import substitution is really the enablement of developing countries to manufacture products in their country. It's really to empower developing countries to be self-sufficient on the products that they need, at least a bulk of them, and reduce their reliance on imported or processed raw materials. So import substitution is as old as the 1980s. It's a policy that came up during when most African countries got their independence, and it was intended to help grow their industrialization, nurture nascent industries in those countries, and just give them some economic muscle. Mm-hmm. It continues to be relevant today because every country, depending on where they are on the economic cycle, still need import substitution to take the economy and the industrialization level to the next level. There's always room for growth. In Kenya, for instance, there's a need to maintain a good balance of trade. There's a need to ease pressure on our foreign currency, dollar and Kenya exchange rate. Mm-hmm. There's a need to spark GDP growth, and the way to do it is to mobilize our industrialization sector. There's also a need to deepen our employment and empower our people. That's the growing of a nation from low income to mid income, and we want to get to a first world with time. Yeah. So it's relevant across Africa.
So much potential here. And Stephan, I'm going to bring you in here because the manufacturing sector, we know, is key to driving import substitution. That's the space in which you play. So give me a sense of how the Kenyan Group keeps its capacity in country while managing to stay competitive.
We really started out purely as an import substitution company, making final products from imported raw materials, which breaks the mold a bit. But I also kind of think that just because you have a foothold in the market, thinking you can be comfortable is enough. Africa is a continent of over 1 billion people, and what we've sort of seen in Kenya is consumers are really maturing in their tastes. They're modernizing pretty rapidly. And so if I look at us as a company, although our core capability really started around the basics of importing substituting what we're imported products, right now we've had to develop a bunch of different capabilities around design, engineering, you name it, so that we can serve the local market better. So Africa's not standing still either.
No, and that's wonderful to hear. And I'm sure if this were easy, everybody would be doing it, right? But I'm also pretty sure that you've faced a number of challenges in implementing your import substitution strategy. Could you give us an idea of what some of those challenges might have been and how you overcame them?
When you think about challenges, I think a lot depends how you frame them. If you are committed to a place, committed to an industry, you really don't have a choice but to confront them. You can't run away from them anymore. And so then you really have to reframe those as opportunities. And the biggest opportunity that I really see is the capacity we can build in our people. Yes, we have machines. Yes, we produce products. But the core of that is our capability. And as I said before, our engineers learn here locally, and our designers and our product people.
Speaking at the beginning about these imports and the effect they've had essentially, but are imports necessarily all bad in inverted commas? I mean, is there a balance to be struck between importing what is useful while keeping the value in Africa?
That's right, Joanne. Not all imports are bad. I think it's keeping a balance. Every country economically has to focus on the things they can do best. If we are an agricultural producing country, or if we have certain minerals in our country, we should process them to a certain stage before we sell them raw, before we export them raw, only to import them all right back in a different finished products, either through our electronics or vehicles or other consumables. So we have to do what we can do best. And we have to invest in creating some value, even when we have to export a processed raw material, a finished product. We do that, we started that in the tea industry, we started that in the coffee industry. What I would call bad manufacturing is, or rather importation, is when we have to import all the way to toothpicks and napkins and tissue that we can, process the end product in country. So I think the word is keep a balance and do your best to improve your industrialization in country.
Yeah. I want to put this question to you now, Stephan. Ann's given us her take on what imports are considered bad and whether they're all bad across the board. What's your view on that?
Yeah, my view is that imports are necessary. So what always needs to be in the back of our minds is where can we actually build that local capability, that local competitiveness that ultimately allows us to not only replace those imports, but go beyond our borders and bring income into the country. Let someone else import our products too. The goal ultimately must be that import substitution is the starting point which allows us to build capability here, and that does require some government policy settings that are appropriate to that. But ultimately, it shouldn't be something that businesses hide behind either. I think if we're overprotected, we never develop that competitiveness that we really need to go beyond that. So this coordination between public, the government, and the private sector, I think, is absolutely critical. I couldn't agree more.
Stephan, there's something that I need to ask, because there's a great deal of environmental concern around single-use plastics. You're deeply entrenched in that industry, and people are really worried about the growth of the plastics industry and essentially the impact it will have environmentally in the decades and in fact even longer than that to come.
So we're in the durable space, so there's not a single item that we produce which is single-use. And really the way that we see that is the more appealing that we can make our products, the longer they stay in people's homes and out of the waste cycle. But on the other end of that, we already have a significant amount of waste volume coming back to us from our existing customers. And we can use that in our production. In fact, they return waste plastic to us, and we're able to process that and then reuse it in our manufacturing. And in fact, we really like doing that. Leave the environmental impact to one side, there's actually a significant cost advantage. And what's important is just still giving consumers at the end of the day a product that they're really happy with. And the content of that product, that's where our engineers come in and really try to figure that out.
Well, that's really good to know, Stephan. Anything you want to add to that, Ann?
Thanks, Joanne, but very well said. I think what I'll just resound is creating awareness that the thinking is that plastic is synonymous to environmental negative impact, but there's a lot of recycling, as Stephan has already said, and that's why we support partners like like Stephan, like Ken Poly and others that do durable plastics, recyclable plastics, and they do get waste plastics from the environment, which, as he explained, is already recycled into products that are not very sensitive to virgin plastic.
Yeah, I mean, one has to think about the environmental and social impact, right, Stephan? What would you say when you look at those words, import substitution and impact? What springs to mind?
The first thing that really comes to me is the employment impact. You know, we've spoken a lot about the macros, but I think if you look on the ground, what does that mean? Thousands and thousands of people, you know, parents, couples, people with ambitions, people who want to move their lives forward as well. And so the immediate impact is employment and everything that comes with that in terms of a healthy society.
Does any such story spring to mind for you, Ann?
Maybe I'll not talk about just one story, but I've seen a community transform. I've seen an industry built from scratch where it was just bare land. They came and bought the land because they needed to expand. And then it made sense for them to source local labor. You know, people who stay within the vicinity and can report to work by 8 a.m., can leave if they need to leave by 5:30 or 6, or if they need to come for the night shift. So you really need to tap into the community around that area. And because the place was not developed, it was quite unsafe to drive, I think, past 6. There were a lot of, shall I say, small traders on the streets, and crime was infiltrating because of that setup. There were a lot of, you know, just say a community of people living in abject poverty. But since this factory came up and they needed physical manpower, they had a preference for women. And they did this because that's the most vulnerable segment of the community. And a lot of the people I talked about who are, you know, really sometimes even begging on the streets were women, and you could see they have children on their backs. And they got working into this company. Of course, they got some, you know, source of income. The company provides them food. I think it's 2 meals a day. They have a program where sometimes, you know, their children can come play football in the part of the, you know, company land that's not developed. And of course, there's a lot of mentorship that goes to the young mothers and their children, encouraging them to, you know, educate their children and so on. The whole place has totally transformed.
Well, I can't wait to visit you both again, and hopefully we will do an episode in the future in which you tell me how it's come along by leaps and bounds and how import substitution has become the watchword of the day. Thank you both for that. Yeah. Wow. And that is where we will leave it for today. Executive for Diversified Industries at Stanbic Bank Kenya, Ann Mugweru, and CEO of Ken Poly Manufacturers, Stephan Grabowski. Thank you so much for joining us. Lovely to have your fascinating insights into this issue. I'm Joanne Joseph, and this has been another episode of The Blue Space, brought to you by Standard Bank Corporate and Investment Banking. Take care. Bye-bye for now.
Visit www.standardbank.com/bluespace to find out more about The Blue Space.